Good morning. I'm glad you're here. So today I'm going to show you kind of another thing that you can do with some of these canes so you can make a more fancy pattern in the end. So it's getting closer to more of the kaleidoscope looking stuff that I was showing you earlier. So I have this one. This right here used to be this one, and I've already kind of started the altering process, and I'll show you how I did that in a second. This one right here is this cane right here. So I was gonna use this one to kind of get you started on that one. So this one right here, you can already see that it is a triangle and that it looks kind of crazy. So when I started with that one, I started off with something like this, and I sliced through the whole thing. And like I said, you don't have to use one of these little slicers like I have. Any kind of thin knife will do. Just make sure, ask your parents first and make sure you wash the knife at the end so you don't get the Sculpey on your food. So all I did was I took the big long cane that I had, I sliced it in half, and then I sliced each of those in half, and then I rotated them. So I kind of started sticking them together like this. So when I started this crazy looking one, it started off like this, and I was adding it together this way. Now I just kind of squished it together until that middle hole was kind of gone. So what it kind of looks like when you're doing a bigger one, it's a little bit more difficult. So now my knife, since it's this kind of knife, I need to be able to make the slice in one go. If you're using a knife from your kitchen and you can slice along the edge, that works good. The needle tool doesn't work as good for this. So using a knife is generally the best way to go. So I kind of lined it up in the middle, and then I sliced it through this way. The main thing when you're, picking a knife for this is you want something that's relatively sharp and relatively thin. It doesn't have to be as wobbly as this one is. This one's super wobbly. But you just want it to be something, there we go, something that's thin. Okay, so now I have the two, basically like two half circles. Okay, so those look like that. Now I could, if I wanted to, I could just join these together. Maybe that's what I'll do. So on the one I did the other day, I cut these in half again, and then I rotated them all so I could really squish it together really well. And if it changes the pattern a little bit, that's okay, right? But I squished it, and then I squished it into a triangle. So for this one right here, I'm gonna squish this into a triangle. So I put both of the stripey ends on one side, and I'm just gonna start squeezing it and compressing it together to start to make it into a triangle shape. Now that's gonna change our little circle shape, the little swirl that we had. It's going to change the swirl and change the overall shape of the cane, but that's okay. And if it gets a little longer, that's okay too. But we would, just like in the last video, you want to make sure that you're trying to keep it as even as you can, and that you're working each side to make sure that each side is as even as possible. So now this one, if I slice this one, I would normally spend a little bit more time on it. But if I slice this one, you can see how it starts to have like the two parts of the swirl kind of showing. Now this one right here that I had started earlier, and I spent a little bit more time evening it out. So far, it looks like this one. So this one looks a little bit more marbly than this one. But the farther you go with this, the more interesting you can make stuff. And you can also kind of combine them to add in different things. So like if I wanted to take this one that has the swirl and I want to combine it with this one, I can make all kinds of weird shapes and stuff. Maybe I'll combine these two. I'm going to combine these two. So if you're going to combine two of these together, you want to start with something that's about the same length. I'll move this one over here. So I'm just compressing this down a little bit further and making it a little bit longer until it's pretty close to that one. So, and by joining these two together, I can make something that looks even more fancy. Okay, so now I have those two that are about the same length. So now I'm going to join these two together. Now at first when I join them together, I really want to make sure that I'm kind of compressing them together to get rid of any air bubbles, because air bubbles in this will show when you go to slice it later and it won't look very nice. Okay, so you want to go all the way across, pushing these together. Squish, squish, squish. Okay, now I'm going to take this and I'm going to make this into a triangle again, because right now it's two triangles stuck together, but I want to even that out a little bit more. So I'm going to say I'm going to make that side down. So I'm going to kind of push the edges down towards the table, and then I'll pinch the center up. So now I'm going to, because this is all squishy, so you can just kind of, you can make it whatever shape you need it to be. So I'm making this back into a triangle again. Now, like I said, I'm trying to do this relatively quickly, but the longer you take on this part and the spending some time making sure everything's really nice and compressed and everything's even, the better it'll look in the end. Okay, so for now I'm going to go ahead and stop with this right here. I'll show you what it looks like on the edge right now, and then I'll show you what you could continue to do. So right now on the edge, it looks like that. So that's starting to look pretty cool. So I could actually take this right here and slice it down the middle like this to get two pieces. So now if I line them up like this, those two start to make a pattern like that. I could do that. I could have these two line up like that and make a pattern like that. I could flip it over and have it start alternating. So like, let's see, this side's easier to see. So I could start with something like that, or, you know, really it's just pick what you think looks the coolest. So I think for me, I like, let's see, I'm gonna put these two together just because I think that looks kind of cool. So I'm gonna stick those two together, and then I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna squish them together, making sure that I'm not letting any air bubbles in there. Okay, so I've squished it together, and I've already kind of started to like get that triangle shape. So I'm gonna kind of squish the edges down again, and then pinch the center up. Now, depending on how wide I leave my triangle at the bottom, I'm either gonna end up with the same shape that I did last time, or if I make the bottom slightly wider this time, then when I stick it together, I could end up with something that looks more like a square instead of like a diamond shape. So I'm gonna squish that together, make it the good triangle. Go around. So like I said, this process takes a little while, but it looks really awesome when it's done. Okay, getting that all nice. Okay, so you can kind of see that I've changed the shape. So this is my new shape. Now if I just cut this in half again, then when I add those two together, that starts to look really cool, right? So for this one, I think I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stick these two together and leave this square because I like how this looks. So I'm gonna make my kaleidoscope look more square. Now you can do, like I said, there's all kinds of different stuff you could do. You don't have to do a square one. You could do one that ends up being a circle. You could have one that ends up being a triangle. It just kind of depends. But it's just all about the slicing it and layering it and compressing it together so there's no air bubbles. So just making sure that that's nice and square. Now, if you want to, you could take an extra piece of the clay and you could add a little border around this. So like if I added this white clay around the edge and added that on, that could make a nice little border in between all the pieces. That's you cut it off and roll it up just like we did in the other videos. That would look really nice too, help add a border around everything. This can also be, if you wanted to, you could round this off and roll it into a longer, skinnier coil. And just like we did with the other ones, this pattern would stay basically the same, but it would just get smaller and smaller and smaller. Like we did with this here. This was the same cane, but this was bigger and then I rolled it smaller. So there's all kinds of stuff to do, but you are gonna need a cane to use for the bowl that I'll show next time. All right, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.